Talk a little bit about a case that is one of those things, where people can jump to conclusions, but there may be more to it than at first appears. I'm referring to the German airline Lufthansa, which has just been fined by the US Transportation Department over an incident 2 years ago, 2022, regarding a flight from New York City to Frankfurt. Um, in which a group of Orthodox Jewish men were denied boarding. And the airline's been fined for civil rights violations. This was American jurisdiction because it was an American airport. I think it was JFK was a departure point. Anyway, I'm going to read out the piece from the Independent and my take on this. I've also watched an associated news report from I don't know what network that is, if I can get it again, or NBC News actually. So this is a report from the Independent. They've put a link to the NBC News piece. The story is by Rich Booth. German airline Lufthansa has been fined a huge $4 million for its treatment of a group of Jewish passengers who were denied boarding a 2022 flight in Frankfurt. In Frankfurt, so the New York was the final destination. The group had previously flown to Germany from New York, so this was the return flight. The US Transportation Department said on Tuesday that the fine is the largest the agency has issued against an airline for civil rights violations, though Lufthansa was given credit for $2 million for compensation it gave the passengers, cutting the fine in half. That's still a pretty big fine, even for an airline. The department said most of the 128 passengers who were denied boarding wore distinctive garb typically worn by Orthodox Jewish men, although many did not know each other and were not travelling together. They told investigators that Lufthansa treated them as if they were a group and denied boarding to all over alleged misbehaviour by a few passengers. A Lufthansa employee was recorded at the airport telling a passenger who was banned from boarding it was Jewish people who made the mess, Jewish people who made the problem. The passenger is heard responding, I was wearing a mask the entire time, why am I lumped in with them? They were among 131 passengers who were flying from New York through Frankfurt to Budapest to attend an annual memorial event to honour an Orthodox rabbi. So this was Frankfurt was the crossover destination. They were going to Budapest, and I think this was the return flight. Some said flight attendants told them in the first flight about the requirement to wear a face mask and not to gather in aisles or near emergency exits. The Lufthansa crew members did not identify any passengers who failed to obey their instructions, which the airline said was due to the sheer number of violations and because many traded seats during the flight. The captain alerted Lufthansa security about misbehaviour among the passengers, which set in motion the steps that led to their being denied boarding on the connecting flight, according to a consent order in the case. Lufthansa rejected any allegation by the department that the events in this matter result from any form of discrimination and disputes that any employee acted unbiased, but it acknowledged errors in company procedure and communications. Lufthansa reached a settlement with most of the passengers in 2022. Um, and in the clip, it shows footage of the incident, and then it shows one of the men basically saying, "Why do you hate us so much?" There was a German police officer, I don't think he was an airline employee, getting quite angry. He said, "Who said that? Who said it?" Getting quite defensive about it. Um, I suspect probably both sides are to blame. I do think that people take a dim view of perceived preferential treatment for religious groups. Now, 2022, the pandemic was still very much going on, so mask wearing was mandated around the world. In this video, it does show the men are indeed wearing masks, so the men in the video are abiding by that. I do think it's unfair to punish an entire perceived group if some are violating rules. And there's no clarification on what the bad behaviour was. That might be helpful if the airline clarified exactly what that was. I mean, were they being aggressive? Were they? Um, they mentioned that they were gathering near, the emergency exits and stuff. Um, I'm not sure if the group's being entirely honest when they say they don't know each other because they say that they swap seats. So if they, I mean, it may be that this was if you go with a large group to the same event. You're not going to know absolutely everyone in the group, so that part may be true. But, they're swapping seats on the flight. That's not generally something people do with strangers. Um, but a lot of people looking at this, I've looked at some of the comments and other sources. I've tried to post, but there's that ridiculous thing. This violates our community guidelines, which is again a reminder of how absurd automated, systems are with these things. I didn't say anything that anyone else didn't say. I just said some of the things I've said in this video. Very frustrating. But anyway, the airline probably did make some mistakes in its communication. I think they were probably wrong to treat them all as one group and just to deny everyone boarding. It's unfair on those who weren't flouting, the rules. But I do think, frankly, there will be some people who milk being held to account, and they will, frankly, try to play the discrimination card if they're called out on it. So if you get someone who's being stubborn, maybe they're not wearing a mask, maybe they are not following the guidelines of airline crew, then that's an incident. Then it's very easy to frankly pull the discrimination card, and I think that may be what's going on here. There's been incidents before where Orthodox men have got on flights, and there's been incidents because they refuse to sit next to women. I'm not saying all Orthodox men have that attitude, but some do. They have a misogynistic attitude, and I'm talking about another incident here where they refuse to sit next to women on flights, or they'd wear plastic on themselves and nonsense like that. I don't think any religious group should get special treatment, whether Jews, Christians, Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus. No religious group should get special treatment. I think the airline maybe could have handled it better in terms of communication, because it was kind of collective punishment. That is unfair on those who weren't flouting the rules. But there is safety issues there, not just because it was the midst of a pandemic, but also if they're, gathering in aisles and, flouting the rules that the airline has, that other passengers have to abide by, then why should they have special treatment? Having said that, missing a flight is a major inconvenience. So if I had been punished for something I hadn't done, I'd be pretty upset about that. So I'm not totally against. I'm not saying they're all just making up. There may be something in that. However, I think the airline is probably right to say this wasn't on the grounds of bias. It was more about procedural mistakes. Because, I mean, can you imagine the optics of a German airline openly discriminating against Jewish men? I don't think they'd be that foolish, to be honest. I think it was more mistakes in the procedures. So I think both parties are to blame. The airline could probably have handled things better, but those men who were causing a problem, they shouldn't be milking it and claiming they were discriminated against. They should take some responsibility and say, okay, I should have just followed the guidelines that everyone else has to follow. The US Transportation Board stepping into this department, they say that they have a right to, because it was, but why now? This was settled 2 years ago, for the most part, when the airline paid out. The fact the airline did pay out could be one of two things. It could be because they did indeed recognise that they made procedural mistakes, or frankly, it could just be to limit fallout. The optics of it. A German airline discriminating against Jewish men, so they pay out. I don't know, I wasn't there, but I would certainly have a problem with it if this was a case of basically getting special treatment as being a religious group, right? And I would say exactly the same thing if it was Muslims or a Christian group or any other group who were demanding special treatment. The fact that they were in traditional garb, that would make them distinctively Orthodox Jewish, doesn't in itself point to the airline discriminating. If the flight attendant said that they were, it was Jewish people who were causing this, does that mean he or she was talking about the whole group, or is it literally what it is, that there were some Jewish people in that group causing problems? So something like this, I think. I mean, the US Transportation Department would have to justify why they're issuing such a heavy fine. I assume Lufthansa has no choice. because otherwise they won't be able to operate in the United States. And it's a major airline. But I think something about this seems a little off. Like, it may be that some of the group were unfairly tarred with the same brush. In the film Final Destination, the thriller movie, there's a scuffle on the flight. If you know the film, it's about a young guy who has a premonition. There's a scuffle on the flight, and some students who were not involved were collectively taken in with the same group. So, there may be some of these men were unfairly punished because of the behaviour of others. But if they were switching seats, it would have been hard for the staff to see who was causing trouble and who wasn't. Um, it also kind of counters the claim that they didn't know each other. I mean, it's less likely they're going to switch seats with strangers. Maybe they will. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. I do think that there should be no special treatment for religious groups. Having said that, if someone missed their flight when they've done nothing wrong, then they're right to be upset about that. That's a major inconvenience. Um, and I don't know if they had to pay for the next connecting flight or if they were just put on the next connecting flight or what. But certainly if they had to pay for that, that's unfair when they've done nothing wrong. So, and I have to say, the video itself, the men involved were wearing masks. So that counters the claim that they weren't. Um, so it's just one of those cases who may be more to it. If anyone could bring more information about this case, then feel free to add that in the comments.